Hello, today we will be talking about the curriculum theory, Essentialism. Essentialism is the most widely used theory in America and was founded on the ideals of educator William Bagley in the early 1900s. The curriculum is focused on basic skills such as reading, writing, and math, and is very teacher-directed. Standards-based instruction and standardized testing are main components of this curriculum. There is a large focus on student and teacher accountability. Supporters of this theory want children to learn how to be respectful and knowledgeable citizens that will help to maintain a peaceful, democratic society. William Bagley is the originator of this theory and advocated for change in 1938, after feeling that the progressivism movement had taken education away from the basics. After the launch of the satellite Sputnik, and after the war had ended, supporters of Essentialism realized that our children were not as well educated as they needed to be to compete with the achievements of other countries. So the 1980s began to see the rise of many educational bills through the federal government in response to the concern over our deficient schooling. The essentialist theory in place in most U.S. schools has brought a fair share of strengths and weaknesses. States now have high standards, which is raising the level of rigor in classrooms. Additionally, with all the new government legislation, there has been more funding provided than in prior decades. However, with these new standards and federal funds has come an intense focus on teacher and student accountability. This has led to standardized testing, merit-based pay for teachers, competition among schools and teachers, and an increase in charter schools, just to name a few.
Essentialism aim is to promote the intellectual growth of the individual so that society may benefit, according to Dr. Screencast. Key to this particular theory is the emphasis on the basic core subjects and that all children should learn them thoroughly. Essentialists see the school's primary function as the preservation of the basic elements of human culture, and this transferred and taught directly to the next generation. This approach to education was in reaction to progressive ideas that were primarily in the 1920s and 30s that we have also explained in our earlier presentation points. Teachers act as the authority figure while the curriculum content centers on major content subject areas. So many proponents of essentialism critique American education and compared them to that of the European discipline. William Bagley, one of Essentialism's most articulate spokesmen, critiqued and gave recommendations to improve American education through many writings and conferences, as well as Hyman Rickover and Arthur Bester. William Bagley was an American professor of education, which he advocated for the teaching profession and the general improvement of education. Bagley was a teacher, principal, and then joined the college faculty at Columbia University. Bagley is most known to Essentialism for his article, An Essentialist Platform for the Advancement of American Education, which came as a response again to the theory of progressive education. In promoting core traditional subjects, Bagley felt that this was essential in a good education. He also believed that the sole goal of education was to develop good citizens who will be useful, which he often referred to as social efficient individuals. Bagley contributed to essentialism by advocating a modern but yet balanced approach to education that should be available to all. Hyman Rickover was an admiral in the United States Navy and advocated the return to hardcore basics in education. He felt that if American education would focus more on the basics, this would lead students to be better prepared to enter an intensive and rigorous profession of technology program of study. Rickover's ideas can be seen in his various articles to include Swiss schools and ours, why theirs are better, and education freedom, which call for the return to the fundamentals. Many of his suggestions that focus on the back to basics of education stem from the desire to help America catch up with the Russians in the field of technology and science. His critiques often centered around the following: that American schools were failing to tap into the potential of students, public schools were contributing to the educational lag, and American educators could learn from European educational experiences. Although Rickover was not a traditional educator, his critiques on American education resounded loudly for many. This led him to testify in many governmental committees on topics to include grouping by ability level, European and American school comparisons, and the purpose of public schools. Arthur Bester, which is our next influential key person, was a historian most noted for his research of utopian societies. He was also devoted to education and was a founding member and past president of the Council for Basic Education. Two of his well-known writings were Educational Wastelands and The Restoration of Learning, explored what he called the sterility of American pre-collegiate education. Noted for Arthur Bester, he was also a renowned critic. In the 1950s, Arthur Bester argued that public curriculum in schools should stress the inquiry in the basic field of knowledge. He also believed that teacher competency should be evaluated alongside their students, and this will essentially give us student success. Similarly to Bagley, Bester felt that the role of school was to pass along the knowledge and that this would be the only way to master the problems of new environment. More importantly, Bester believed in curriculum being systemic and that students needed to see the structure in curriculum in order to be successful. As we have stated earlier, essentialism is a widely used theory in our schools today. It is generally lecture style, and the curriculum is focused on reading, phonics, writing, math, history, and geography. Schools have yearly standardized assessments that assess state and national standards. These characteristics are similar to how other school systems function in other countries. Additionally, the curriculum is already developed for teachers, and students generally follow along and do not initiate or create their own learning. Therefore, the curriculum is a teacher-directed and does not generally take into account student interest or allow students to direct or guide their own learning. Students are expected to be respectful learners and take in knowledge their teachers have to provide. As an instructional leader, at my current school, it is my responsibility that all students receive a quality education through the best instruction and curriculum there is to offer. I strongly believe that all children should have access to a diverse curriculum, learn in a safe and positive environment, experience the finest teacher-facilitated instruction, and have an opportunity to develop their interests. To ensure that students are indeed receiving these measures, there must be an appropriate way to monitor and evaluate them. Standardized testing seems to be more the common method of evaluating student progress, but certainly not the only method. I agree in part with many aspects of essentialism to include focusing, mastering concepts and principles of subject matter, and evaluating the core areas. But I do not support the idea of our students being passive consumers of knowledge and content. It is important to know our who before we can fill students with information and knowledge. I am also in partial agreement with the ideas of progressivism. In regards to education, focusing on the whole child and not the teacher. The idea of students being active learners, shared decision-making, and student-selected topics are what will make our learning experience greater and the success for our students even more.
My personal philosophy on curriculum is a hybrid of progressivism and essentialism. As an instructional coach for the last 4 years now, I have realized the importance of accountability, as well as the impact of both excellent instruction and weak instruction. Although standardized testing, merit-based pay, school report cards, and intense teacher evaluations have become the new norm in American schools, I believe they are somewhat necessary to maintain high expectations for our teachers and schools. All children deserve excellent teaching, and there needs to be a way to ensure that is happening. I also think creating state and national standards that are rigorous and challenge our students to learn the essential knowledge and skills to be successful in a global society was incredibly necessary. So, I'm in support of some of the accountability and increase in standards that the essentialism movement has provided. However, excellent teaching is not always lecture or teacher-directed, as essentialists propose. Collaboration, cooperative learning, and integrated curriculum can be powerful ways to educate students, and students are often more engaged in this style of instruction that progressivists support. In creating standards-based integrated curriculum, Susan Drake says, quote, "It is unlikely that students will be satisfied with the teaching styles of the 20th century." End quote. Effective teaching needs to engage students, and that may require teachers to allow students to direct their own learning and to find ways to integrate subjects and concepts. I would love to see curriculum theories in the next decade begin to make this shift to a hybrid of essentialism and progressivism so that we can educate our children to be successful in work and life, regardless of who they are or where they came from.